In a previous video, we talked about preloading chunks with Webpack, and this video will be covering the same topic, but instead we're going to focus on a certain aspect that I haven't fully discussed in the previous video, and that is that not every dynamic chunk can be preloaded. For that, I'm going to use the diagram from the previous video, which is right here. To quickly describe what we have here is that we have the index.js file, which corresponds to the index chunk. This chunk will be always fetched by the browser in our case, because this chunk is the entry point to our app. So this chunk is mandatory for our app to work. It is the fundamental, let's say, the base for our app. And this chunk will also contain some runtime code, which is generated by Webpack. This generated code is necessary for the entire app to work smoothly. Then this index.js file will also import via the dynamic import function a.js and b.js, which will in turn create chunks for both A and B. One small detail that I skipped over in the previous video is that we are importing a.js via the import function, but we are also using the Webpack preload through magic comment. For me, when I was first using that in the beginning, I was expecting that as soon as I click refresh to see a request for the a.js file, because I was using the preload magic comment. So at least this is what takes place for the a1.js. So if we take a look at what's going on in A, we are importing a1.js via the import function and with the Webpack preload true. And notice what happens when I click on load a.js. It will also fetch a1, but it will only the browser will only fetch it and store it in the cache, such that when we actually imported the file, the module, I'm not sure if the module has been parsed yet. I don't think so. So the file will be served from the cache and then executed, and that's why we see a1 here. But as you've just seen, this doesn't happen for a.js, and I was wondering why. And this is the essence of this video. One hint that we have is that the parent chunk of A is index, which is the main chunk. So what we have for now is that we have, let's also write it. We have index is main chunk. We have A is imported, or let's also let's call it A is an async chunk. Index imports A via Webpack preload. So that's what we have here. We have these three sentences. If we go back to the basics and read about the preload resource hint, we will see that it is being used for assets that are needed as soon as possible, as soon as the browser fetches a page. So this shouldn't be misused. In our situation, what I think is going on is that we are contradicting ourselves when we want to import dynamically a file from a file that is part of the main chunk, which means that it will be loaded as soon as possible for the app. So index is main chunk, A is an async chunk, which is fine for now. But if we also want to preload this doesn't make sense, because if our main goal is because we want to ask, why do we need to preload? We need to preload because we need A to be available as soon as possible in the browser, in the page. Well, if we need that, then dynamically importing it, which means at a later point in time, so if we want to load it dynamically as well as preloading it, those two don't make sense, because if we want a.js to be part of the entry point, which means to be loaded as soon as possible, then we could simply not use the import function and use a regular import statement like this. So I hope you're seeing the contradiction I'm talking about. This is the main chunk, which means will always be loaded. A is an async chunk, which is fine until now. Let's put it like this: imports A. So at this point, all things are fine, because what we have from these 3 points, we want a.js to be loaded sometime in the future. But if we also add the fact that a must be preloaded, then at this point this doesn't make sense, because once again, if we want that a module to be available as soon as possible, then we could simply not use a dynamic import and have it like this. So this would be the reason by that it won't work. Now, why does it work for this? Well, let's delete this. This works for a1.js because by using preload, we tell Webpack that a1.js is essential for a.js, and since a.js will be loaded sometime later, then it makes sense when we finally decide to load a.js to also load in parallel, or to fetch in parallel, a1.js, because that's what we have instructed Webpack to do. We have instructed Webpack to make sure that a1.js is available as soon as possible for a.js, because by using preload, our intention is that we are going to use that module very soon, after in this case a.js is loaded. So I hope things make sense. I don't think I've skipped any explanations that I planned for this small video. I think we also have some other topics to discuss about Webpack preloading, but I think those topics will be for a different video. I hope the explanation was clear, and I will see you in the next one.